All right, well, good afternoon. We're so excited that you've joined us for sermon sessions here at Bel Air Church. And today we're going to be wrapping up our conversation on our series, Let's Go, as we go through the book of Acts. And I'm joined with some really dear friends today as we discuss last week's sermon. And so I just want to first start us off. What were your initial thoughts about the discipleship plan of Jesus and his call and what we think our call is and how it comes into his play with leading our lives?
Well, first, thanks for wrapping up our sermon series.
You're welcome.
Just so special to know that you stepped up and did that. We've got an amazing teaching team. The rest of the teaching team was in Baja building a home, and you were holding down the fort, giving an amazing message. And so if people haven't listened to it, of course they can go to YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But I love how in the very beginning, even before you set it up, you talked about how important repentance is and changing your mind in particular. And I feel like that's such a negative word in our culture. But I recall, prayed and kind of set up the entirety of, approaching God's word with humility, and that truth is a person and his name is Jesus. And we can come to these moments with like our pre-prescribed view of like what we want and how God will help us. But the way of Jesus is us changing our mind and saying, Jesus, you have the best way, and I want to follow you. And that's a lifetime journey. It's not this instant moment of, knowledge transfer, but following him in every area of your life and dying to yourself and yielding. And so there was so much about it that I loved. It was the withness that you talk so much about and walking with Jesus in every area. And that's a lifelong journey. And we live in a culture that wants it instant and now.
Right, totally.
And so as I was hearing you preach, in the recording afterwards, I was just thinking about, gosh, our culture is so instant. They want the fix now. They want the solution now. And I recall you saying at one point, it's not so much about just solving the situations or the problems that we think, but actually transforming us more and more in the image of Jesus. That's what God cares about. Yeah. And that's the long, slow work of God.
Totally.
So I love that.
The long, slow.
Long, slow.
Yeah. I liked it. Like I think about the path of discipleship, and when you brought in spiritual and emotional maturity, that's helpful, I think, for those of us who have been walking with Jesus. How's my emotional state? How's my emotional intelligence doing? And that has been, I think, something that we just miss so often. We focus on the spiritual part, but how are your emotions? And how are you in relationships? How are you showing up? How are you navigating? Are you approaching conversations with an openness and humility? I think it's really important. So I appreciated that part of it. I even wanted to hear more. I'm like, say more, keep digging.
I'll be back.
Yeah.
So good. What resonated with me was, yes, lots, all of this, but the love your enemies emphasis on what that means for disciples of Jesus and how huge that is, especially in this cultural moment right now. Right. We're not hearing love your enemies. We're hearing other things. And we cannot separate this from being followers of Jesus. Love your enemies. I love it. I have to read this. Luke 6, just to refresh our memories. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do this, right? And if you give payment, you lend payment and you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Do good to them. Love, do good to those who are my enemies. What are you talking about, Jesus? And lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. I just feel like that's important for us to understand, like the fullness of that context of what it means to love your enemies. Because we're like, what does that mean, love your enemies? Do good?
That's a good question.
Do good? No, I don't want to do good. Right? It's one thing to love my neighbor, right? We talked about the greatest commandments, right? Love God, love your neighbor, but to love your enemies. And Jesus even says, like, you've heard it said, right? You know this, you've heard it said, love your neighbor. But I say to you, I'm rewriting this. I'm taking it so much further than is comfortable for you, because I know that this is ultimately going to bring wholeness, healing, thriving, and flourishing to the world, right? It's the kingdom of heaven here now. And it is confession, one of the hardest teachings of Jesus. I would really like to just not look at it And we cannot separate Christ from this teaching. Right. So will I love my enemies? Will you love your enemies? In this cultural moment, what does that mean to do good to those who are, persecuting you or whatever?
Yeah. So. Well, and I think too, it's like, we have to remember that the apex of Jesus' ministry was his death, right? I mean, obviously he rose from the dead, but in that span of his era, like it took him 33 years to get the maturity to be able to do that. Like it says that he grew in favor with wisdom and God. So that wasn't like an overnight thing. Like he walked that out and then was able to like debut this extravagant love that we've never seen before. So going back to process, like what you were saying, but I think it's interesting, a point you brought up is that especially Christians, and I'll just shoot it straight, like we love our enemies, but we like love them the way we think they want to be loved. And they're like, we don't feel loved by you, and there's this and I was like thinking about a story, years ago. I was working in a restaurant and there was actually like the Satanist worship, like he does like rock band Satanist worship kind of stuff. And he kept coming in like being like, I'm depressed. And I don't know, that was he kept saying it over and over again. And so I was just like, well, maybe I should pray for him. So I remember we were like rolling silverware and I was like, hey, so I keep hearing you're depressed, and I was like, can I pray for you? And he just like, I didn't know that he was like a Satanist word. That's what he does, and he just gets super angry. He's like, no, and like he avoided me for like months, and I was like, shoot, like he doesn't feel loved by me, like here I am like trying to pray. But that was interesting though, is but like right after that happened, I went and found him and I said, hey, I'm so sorry. Like, I've just offended you, and I just heard you say this. This is what I want. I cared about you. I'm so sorry if that wasn't the right thing. And he was like, he's like, I respect that. Don't ever do that again, and he like walks off, and so he like doesn't talk to me for like 3 months. He like avoids me like no one's business. And I remember just like feeling the Lord say like, if he doesn't trust you to love him, like, why are you offering something that he's not ready for, And so I just tried to be like the best coworker ever, and just not like in a codependent way, but I just was like, let me just be normal, And he kept like, he would like over my shoulder be like, that Christian, like he would say stuff like that to other people. And I was like, oh gosh, But then I don't even know what happened. Like one day something, like we joked about something and it just like shifted the climate between me and him. And then he started coming in like telling me about his week and telling me about what's going on. And it was like, I finally loved him. And I remember like the Lord saying like, you didn't love him in the beginning, like you judged him. You had kind of this persona of what you thought he was, but actually like, I wanted you to actually grow in relationship with him before you reach out and actually pray for him, And it was like so interesting one day because I was like, hey, like I'd love to come to one of your shows. And he like looks at me and he goes, I'd love for you to come to my show, but the next one is called Dark Arts. He's like, how about you come to the next one? Like it was just like the sweet, like respect, And I was like, yeah, let's do the next one, but it, like we laughed about it. And it just, I don't know, there was like a process that I went on where realizing I need to make sure I'm loving people the way they feel loved, like kind of love languages, And that, I don't know, what are your thoughts about that? Because I feel like sometimes us Christians think we're loving people, but people are like, you're not loving me,
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a fine line where, to an extreme, my boys might think the way I want to be loved is you say yes to everything I want. So I get ice cream whenever I want. I get this and this and this and this and this. So I think taken to an extreme, that's actually unloving, always loving people on their terms, because sometimes the things that people want are the last thing they need.
Yeah.
But I think that that's extreme one way. But also this presumption of like, I know what's best for them, is also unhealthy. So I wonder if part of the answer to that is just being prayerful. Holy Spirit, give me your heart, give me your ears, give me your eyes. Help me to see this person the way that you see them. Give me wisdom. So then it's never like a one size fits all that you can just copy and paste and just apply in every situation, but really in every situation requires discernment. And sometimes it is yes for ice cream for breakfast.
Totally.
Yeah. And sometimes it's no, not in this moment, I don't know. Like I wonder if maybe a deeper reliance on the Holy Spirit in each situation rather than with our preconceived, I know what people need. They need this, they need this, they need this. So I'm just going to rinse and repeat.
Totally.
I don't want to simplify this answer, but I'm going to try, actually. I do feel like Jesus modeled this with time with people. He was present with people, and he gave them his time. His he wasn't looking over anybody's shoulder. The last thing I can see Jesus doing is being like, trying to look. He was present with people. listening to their lives, listening to their pain, entering into it. And I think in this world where we just want to, like, everything's fast paced and quick and we're so busy, the thing that communicates love is giving our time and attention. And like the text said, not expecting to get anything in return.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this so that you'll whatever, but it's like to show somebody love. I mean, the amount of times I've seen this even in a ministry context of just sitting with somebody and giving them time. They feel so loved by that.
Yeah.
Asking questions and not to respond, but out of curiosity, like, tell me more about your life. Like I love asking people, tell me what you were like as a child. Like, what were you like as a kid? Just to get a better understanding of what some of these experiences, like we talked about a little bit last night. But it's just a simple way. And I know we can go down the list. There's more complicated, nuanced ways of loving people, but can we give people our time without judging, but with curiosity, with compassion, with space? And I think that's crucial right now.
And I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder how many times Jesus was late to something because he was being present with whoever was in front of him.
Yeah.
There's quite a few.
Yes.
I don't know the answer, but
Yeah, Mark 5, the bleeding woman.
Right?
One of my favorite stories
Totally,
ever.
I
He's on his
know.
way to go heal
Yes.
Jairus' daughter,
Yes.
and he
Yeah.
takes the time to listen to this woman's whole truth.
Yes.
Her 12 years of suffering.
Yes.
He doesn't say, like, wrap it up, sister, like, we're good.
Right.
I got to get to, he takes the time. He's interruptible. So I think that's huge. So forgive us for being late, everybody.
Yeah.
but he gets
Just
there.
do it.
But he
He
eventually
does.
gets there.
And he
Sure.
and
He
brings
doesn't
us
blow
her.
it off like, you know what?
Yeah. And the
I'm now
miracle's
out of
even
time.
bigger because
Yes.
it's not just healing her from
Yes.
illness. It's raising her from the
Yeah.
dead.
I was walking to staff meeting 2 weeks ago, and staff meeting starts at 10 o'clock, our chapel time. And I walk by an office and I see Drew, our leader, hugging somebody because they were having a moment. And there was a couple people in the office, and I was like, it's exactly where you need to be right now. You need to be with that person. And then we go into the meeting, and the meeting was, where's Drew? And I'm thinking, you don't know. You just don't know what he's doing. I didn't feel at liberty to say, well, he's over here. It was just like, I knew what was going on. I just wonder how many times we don't get perspective of where the person is at. Back to your point about presence. And that's what love looks like. Love shows up in the moment. And sometimes it disrupts our precious little schedules, and we have to give time and space. But then when you walked in the room, you were present, you were with us. But I think that's part of that, is just sometimes along the way, these perceived disruptions are actually gifts to be present with people and to show them what love is like.
Boy, and that was a heavy moment in that office. One of the heavier situations I'm now aware of in 2025.
Yeah.
And it was such a weird moment because I was just popping by to like pop my head in to thank someone for something. And then I realized the temperature of the room, there was a heaviness. And then I stepped in. So even like my mother-in-law calls them God winks or divine appointments. Like sometimes like God just puts you into a place. And if you're open to it,
Right.
it's like the perfect timing to lend an ear, to just be present, to not necessarily have answers, but to have that faithful presence. And I wonder if there's a lot more divine appointments and God winks throughout our days and weeks than we might be aware of. So I want to have that sensitivity and that tenderness.
Yeah. And I think, also I talked a little bit in the sermon about just not already knowing. I think that kind of plays into that. Like when I already know my day to day. I already know what the priority is. I already know where I'm supposed to be or what this text means, and being able to be open and curious about the day too. Being like, Lord, I'm actually, like it says in Proverbs, like I lay my plans before you, you direct my steps, right? And so, maybe today I had this scheduled, but actually the Lord's like, this is not what I'm doing. Like you can do that or you can do what I'm doing, and there's a grace for what he's doing. And so I think that there's just also that like open, I think there's like a flexibility in the discipleship class, like discipleship plan of Jesus, like, because I think we always have a preconceived what it's going to look like. I talked about like, would Saul have signed up if he knew he was going to be in chains in chapter 8:28 to the transformation power of Christ? I mean, I don't know. There's so many promises God's asked me or things that he's asked me to lay down that I'm like 15 years later, I'm like, really? Like that, if I had known that we were like still going to be single, or like whatever, like would I have still said yes back then when you asked me to walk away from that? And true story there. But like being like, no, actually you do know me and you know my journey and you know where I'm going and where I'm headed. And so like, but the long obedience and then what happens when you get caught 15 years later and you're like, whoa, like I laid that down and yet God didn't come through the way I thought he was going to, and that's an interesting part of this. I think just process of discipleship, of letting go of expectation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, letting go of control and needing to know. Yes,
Yeah.
so that humility. Something that Fuller Seminary emphasized a lot that just has really stuck with me is one faithful step at a time.
Mhm.
Just you
So
can't
good.
know. It's so freeing to be like, I don't have to know. How cool is that? Like I can let go of the control and the expectations of knowing how this is all going to work out. I don't have to be anxious for it. I can just trust you with today.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. Easier said than done. But how freeing is it when you do have those days and those moments of like, today's your day.
Mhm.
What do you want to do with it? I don't need to know. I just need to trust you. And I'm going to take one faithful step at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
I love
My
it.
wife and I had this dream of getting back to Los Angeles 10 years ago. So we started out on this trek to go out and venture into the wild and take on other journeys. But our prayer was like, we just want to go home because LA's home and our family's here. And through that 10-year period, that's part of that discipleship trajectory that we're walking. There was a point where we both had to accept what is.
Mm.
And the acceptance is important. That felt like the first step. Accept what is. This is our reality. This is where we are. We went through some really difficult situations in church context. And then I like to skip over from acceptance right to surrender. And there's a middle ground of grief that we want to skip. So we had to accept, grieve the loss of what we thought life was going to be. Maybe even grieving the possibility that we're not going to get what we want in the future,
Right.
of getting back to LA, and then surrendering the outcome. Constant surrender
Absolutely.
of that trajectory of discipleship is daily. It's daily surrender. I have to surrender this. Even getting back home now, we're here. I still have to surrender on a daily basis my life here at Bel Air, my walk with Christ, where we live, friendships, all of it. I have to surrender all of it daily. And that's been the path, I think, that I've learned that Jesus has led me through is acceptance, grief, surrender. Those three pieces. But it's that grief piece that we don't do very well.
Yeah.
We don't like that part because that's the necessary place inside. You have to make room for the immensity of grief, and it has to move in. And it's not a stranger I want in my life. I don't welcome grief like, oh, I'm so glad you showed up. It moves in whether we want it to or not. It comes in, it like kicks out the door, says, I'm coming in,
Yeah.
make room for me. And I've learned to make room with it, like to dance with it, to celebrate it for what it is, to grieve what was, to open up to what could be, because I don't know what could be. I still don't know. And then to surrender the outcome. I have to do that with my parents. I have to do that with my kids. I have to do that with my own life and my desires. I don't know what's next. All I know is that I keep my eyes fixed on Christ, who's going to make me more like him. That's his commitment to us. I'm going to make you more like me. Do you want in on this gig? I'm like, yes, I do. But it requires all of me to show up and to surrender.
And I think that's kind of the social emotional health component of this whole conversation, because if you don't deal with the grief, that's where we get all the weird resentment. I mean, all the anger, the bitterness, the rage. You meet people who are 40 years into walking with Jesus and they're just angry, and there's there's compassion for that, but I think there's like a missing step of like we don't know how to process uncomfortable emotions sometimes, and we just stuff them and we push them down, especially in the disappointments of our journey and our discipleship. I mean, I think we all have had things where like, man, that was not God's best. That was not God's plan. That can't be like what God planned for my life, you know? And then being able to like accept it, but then also to grieve what we thought was supposed to be there and to give space and be kind to ourselves, right? And be like, man, this isn't how you envision the hopes and dreams of your future, you know?
Yeah.
But being able to let him into our emotions, I think, is a huge part of the discipleship. And then hopefully graduating towards joy, which has been
That's the theme here.
of the last few days, you know, like the goal being connection, the goal being joy, you know, and I love it because it's like joy cannot be felt if you don't feel grief. And my therapist always reminds me, she goes, you know, when you grieve something of like the wounded child, all of a sudden the magical child will pop out one day. Like if you grieve a memory from your pain, all of a sudden you'll remember, like it kind of like, it's like a slot machine. It's like if you do one negative thing, all of a sudden a joy, and it happened like in a deep process of healing I was in, I started grieving some of my childhood stuff. And all of a sudden I started remembering like memories I hadn't remembered of joyful moments in that same era, that part of my childhood. And I was like, this works, you know, but I think it's because when we shut it down, we actually shut down the joy too. And that's the goal is being the most joyful, the most holy, the most happy, the most smiley, you know, I mean, and not fake, but like out of like a depth, you know?
Yeah. I love, wasn't it Brene Brown who talked about if you numb the negative emotions, you numb the positive ones? Like who wants to dim down their joy? I would really like to feel the fullness of my joy. So it's like, I better feel
a
the
dim
pain
down joy.
Can you imagine like, yay, cool. Like that would not be fun. I don't want to do that. So I'm with you. And I think this goes back to just in community. Do we have safe people to process our grief with? You know, do we have, because I remember when my brother died, he was 25 years old. In the wake of that loss, people were there right away. But the long term, are you ready with your grief? Can you move on already? Like there was an impatience with grief. Like people just couldn't.
I mean, that's been 6 months, right?
Right. Like, aren't you over it?
Yeah.
Like you're over it now, right? So I think that we don't have the stamina. We need to build it up. We can. I have a lot of hope. I will not despair. I have a stubborn hope about this. I do feel like we're at a moment where God is calling us into a deeper form of discipleship in this way of being with each other in the grief. But can I sit with somebody who is grieving and it takes a while to sit with them and not fix it? I feel like I've said this a lot here because I really feel passionate about this because this is what Jesus would do right now. Sit with people in their grief in a healthy way. So I don't know. I want to be that.
I think we can learn so much from the Jewish community in this. Yeah. So the whole concept of sitting Shiva it's a communal responsibility. Like in the West, we're so hyper individualized that we've bought in this lie that like the grief process is my responsibility. I have to get through it. And we, I think, wrongly think that we have the capacity as an individual to bear the weight of really what was meant to be carried in community. And other cultures, even outside the Jewish and Christian faith. I've heard so much about Asian cultures and how they take a communal approach to grieving. And there's something so powerful in that to carry one another through that for the long haul.
Totally.
So much to learn.
Yeah, so good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining in today. We're so grateful. And we hope this conversation has been encouraging on your discipleship journey, that wherever you are, that God is with you and he's willing to walk with you. And hopefully you'll graduate to joy. Check us out on all of our socials, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify.